chiefly on Sundays. Practical men and theorists, men of science and religious preachers, lawyers and politicians all agree upon one thing, that individualism may be more or less softened in its harshest effects by charity, but that it is the only secure basis for the maintenance of society and its ulterior progress. It seems, therefore, hopeless to look for mutual aid institutions and practices in modern society. What could remain of them? And yet, as soon as we try to ascertain how the millions of human beings live and begin to study their everyday relations, we are struck with the immense part which the mutual aid and mutual support principles play even nowadays in human life. Although the destruction of mutual aid institutions has been going on in practice and theory for full 300 or 400 years, hundreds of millions of men continue to live under such institutions. They piously maintain them and endeavour to reconstitute them where they have ceased to exist. In our mutual relations, every one of us has his moments of revolt against the fashionable individualistic creed of the day, and actions in which men are guided by their mutual aid inclinations constitute so great a part of our daily intercourse that if a stop to such actions could be put, all further ethical progress would be stopped at once. Human society itself could not be maintained for even so much as the lifetime of one single generation. These facts, mostly neglected by sociologists, and yet of the first importance for the life and further elevation of mankind, we are now going to analyze, beginning with the standing institutions of mutual support, and passing next to those acts of mutual aid which have their origin in personal or social sympathies. When we cast a broad glance on the present constitution of European society, we are struck at once with the fact that, although so much has been done to get rid of the village community, this form of union continues to exist to the extent we shall presently see, and that many attempts are now made either to reconstitute it in some shape or another, or to find some substitute for it. The current theory as regards the village community is that in Western Europe it has died out by a natural death because the communal possession of the soil was found inconsistent with the modern requirements of agriculture. But the truth is that nowhere did the village community disappear of its own accord. Everywhere, on the contrary, it took the ruling classes several centuries of persistent but not always successful efforts to abolish it and to confiscate the communal lands. In France, the village communities began to be deprived of their independence, and their lands began to be plundered as early as the 16th century. However, it was only in the next century, when the mass of the peasants was brought by exactions and wars to the state of subjection and misery which is vividly depicted by all historians, that the plundering of their lands became easy and attained scandalous proportions. Everyone has taken of them according to his powers. Imaginary debts have been claimed in order to seize upon their lands, so we read in an edict promulgated by Louis XIV in 1667. Chacun s'en est accommodé selon sa bienséance. On les a partagés pour dépouiller les communes. On s'est servi de dettes simulées. Edict of Louis XIV of 1667, quoted by several authors. 8 years before that date, the communes had been taken under state management. Of course, the state's remedy for such evils was to render the communes still more subservient to the state, and to plunder them itself. In fact, 2 years later, all money revenue of the communes was confiscated by the king. As to the appropriation of communal lands, it grew worse and worse, and in the next century the nobles and the clergy had already taken possession of immense tracts of land, one half of the cultivated area, according to certain estimates, mostly to let it go out of culture. On a great landlord's estate, even if he has millions of revenue, you are sure to find the land uncultivated. Arthur Young. 1/4 part of the soil went out of culture. For the last 100 years the land has returned to a savage state. The formerly flourishing sologne is now a big marsh, and so on. Théron de Montauge, quoted by Taine in Origine de la France contemporaine, tome 1er, page 441, But the peasants still maintain their communal institutions, and until the year 1787 the village folkmotes, composed of all householders, used to come together in the shadow of a bell tower or a tree, to allot and re-allot what they had retained of their fields, to assess the taxes, and to elect their executive, just as the Russian Mir does at the present time. This is what Babot's researchers have proved to demonstration. Et Babot, le village de l'Ancien Régime, 3e édition, Paris 1892. Close footnote. The government found, however, the folk most too noisy, too disobedient, and in 1787 elected councils composed of a mayor and 3 to 6 syndics chosen from among the wealthier peasants were introduced instead. 2 years later, the Revolutionary Assemblée Constituante, which was on this point at one with the old regime, fully confirmed this law (on the 14th of December 1789), and the bourgeois du village had now their turn for the plunder of communal lands, which continued all through the revolutionary period. Only on the 16th of August 1792 the Convention, under the pressure of the peasants' insurrections, decided to return the enclosed lands to the communes. In eastern France, the law only confirmed what the peasants had already done themselves. See my work, The Great French Revolution, chapters 17th and 18th, London Heinemann 1909. But it ordered at the same time that they should be divided in equal parts among the wealthier peasants only, a measure which provoked new insurrections and was abrogated next year in 1793, when the order came to divide the communal lands among all commoners, rich and poor alike, active and inactive. These two laws, however, ran so much against the conceptions of the peasants that they were not obeyed, and wherever the peasants had retaken possession of part of their lands, they kept them undivided. But then came the long years of wars, and the communal lands were simply confiscated by the state (in 1794) as a mortgage for state loans, put up for sale and plundered as such, then returned again to the communes and confiscated again (in 1813), and only in 1816 what remained of them, that is about 15 million acres of the least productive land, was restored to the village communities. After the triumph of the middle class reaction, the communal lands were declared August 24, 1794, the state's domains, and together with the lands confiscated from the nobility, were put up for sale and pilfered by the barn noir of the small bourgeoisie. True that a stop to this pilfering was put next year (Law of 2 prairial en 5e), and the preceding law was abrogated, but then the village communities were simply abolished and cantonal councils were introduced instead. Only 7 years later (9 prairial en 2e), that is in 1801, the village communities were reintroduced, but not until after having been deprived of all their rights, the mayor and syndics being nominated by the government in the 36,000 communes of France. This system was maintained till after the Revolution of 1830, when elected communal councils were reintroduced under the law of 1787. As to the communal lands, they were again seized upon by the state in 1813, plundered as such, and only partly restored to the communes in 1816. See the classical collection of French laws by Dalloz, Répertoire de jurisprudence, also the works of De Noailles, Darras, Bonnemere, Babou, and many others. Till this was not yet the end of the troubles of the communes. Every new regime saw in the communal lands a means for gratifying its supporters, and three laws (the first in 1837 and the last under Napoleon III) were passed to induce the village communities to divide their estates. 3 times these laws had to be repealed, in consequence of the opposition they met with in the villages. But something was snapped up each time, and Napoleon III, under the pretext of encouraging perfected methods of agriculture, granted large estates out of the communal lands to some of his favourites. As to the autonomy of the village communities, what could be retained of it after so many blows? The mayor and the syndics were simply looked upon as unpaid functionaries of the state machinery. Even now, under the Third Republic, very little can be done in a village community without the huge state machinery, up to the prefect and the ministries, being set in motion. It is hardly credible, and yet it is true, that when, for instance, a peasant intends to pay in money his share in the repair of a communal road, instead of himself breaking the necessary amount of stones, no fewer than 12 different functionaries of the state must give their approval, and an aggregate of 52 different acts must be performed by them and exchanged between them before the peasant is permitted to pay that money to the communal council. All the remainder bears the same character. This procedure is so absurd that one would not believe it possible if the 52 different acts were not enumerated in full by a quite authoritative writer in the Journal des Économistes (1893, April, page 94), and several similar examples were not given by the same author. What took place in France took place everywhere in Western and Middle Europe. Even the chief dates of the great assaults upon the peasant lands are the same. For England the only difference is that the spoliation was accomplished by